Once you've opened Photoshop, you will see that across the screen at the top, you have pull-down menus. And those work like any normal pull-down menu where you click on them and it will give you other options. There's also a ribbon across the top, and that changes depending on which command or tool you are working with. You're going to see when you open Photoshop a toolbar. This is your toolbar, and it's got a series of tools. It's also got colors. This is where you work with colors. You can work with up to 2 colors at once, but you're not limited to 2. You will probably have a whole bunch of palettes open. I only have my layer palette open because I like a very clean, minimal a workspace. So what you will want to do is go to Window, and you can control your workspace. You can tell it what you're working on. And if you ever lose anything, you can reset this, or you can create a new workspace. Okay, and that will allow you to determine how you work. Studies show that when you have your tools set up to where you're comfortable with them and that you don't really have to think about them anymore once you get comfortable with them, you can get into a state that's known as flow. And we'll talk more about that as we go. It just is your most productive, most creative self. And that's why it's important to have your own software on your own computer with your own settings. It just makes it easier for you to work so that you go to the same layout that you're comfortable with. This is mine. It doesn't have to be yours. You can use whatever works for you. And then you'll see I have an image open on my screen just to show you when I'm talking about an artboard, I'm talking about any image or project that you're currently working on as an artboard. And so I just happen to have this one open. So when you want to get started here, let's go to File. You can open an image or you can create a new one. Let's go to New first. And this is where it says New Document, and you can have all kinds of defaults that you save and work with. But also, when I'm going to show you over here, I can control from scratch what I want to see. And so let's talk about this. When you name your documents, let's save it as a preset. When you save your documents, you are wanting to give them a unique name that if you look at the file 6 months from now, you'll know exactly what it is. I have seen people over the years who will call something drawing 1, or they'll leave the default. And then when they go to look for something, they have a very hard time finding it because they didn't name it wisely. So since we are working on project 1, so I'm going to start with the class, and then I'm going to call it project 1. And any other details that I might want, since this is a pop art, I might call it pop art. And since we're doing the album, I might call it that. And I didn't spell that properly. There we go. Oops, that's not it either. A-L album. I don't know, it doesn't look right. So you're going to want to give it a name so that if 6 months from now, I go in and I see this file, I know exactly what it is. Okay? The next thing we're going to work with is size. And you can work with pixels, but let's start with inches since inches are what most of us are already familiar with. In this particular assignment, we know that we need to be 12 by 12. Now, orientation refers to any layout that is not square. Ours is square. If you want the longer side to run up and down the page and the shorter side to run along the bottom of the page, you will use what's known as landscape. If you want to change it, rotate it so that the long side is on the bottom, then you will use what is known as landscape. Okay, so portrait, landscape, portrait, landscape. Okay, that just changes the way it's laid out. Now, resolution. The default here was 72, which is screen resolution. Even when I'm working with something that's going to be digital, I always recommend using a minimum of 100 pixels per inch. If you're going to print this and you have the capacity, no matter what, I automatically go with 300 because it's easier to scale it down than it is to scale it up when you're talking about raster imaging. And the reason is because raster means that it's made up of a series of pixels, which is why we're talking about pixels per inch. And the higher that number, the more pixels you have per inch, the sharper your resolution, the sharper your clarity. And that means that if you're going to print this at any point, you want it to be around the 300 ppi mark. And that has to do with printer capacity. Over time, printers are getting better, but 300 is still a printed image that's 300 ppi is still pretty good for what we need in terms of high quality. You can go higher, but know that if you do go higher, it begins to eat up space. It makes the file bigger. So unless you're working with unlimited storage space, you want to do what you need to do a great job. You don't want to do less. You don't want to do more. Okay. For this, we have multiple choices of color mode. Grayscale's black and white, RGB color, CMYK color, and lab color. Now, if you're going to work for something that's digital, you're going to use RGB color. If you're going to print it, you want to use CMYK. And I believe for this assignment, we're working with CMYK. And then you control whether it's 8-bit or 16-bit. 16-bit is higher resolution, higher colors. You have more colors with 16-bit. We're going to leave it with 8-bit for now because for all intents and purposes, that's fine. What is our background going to be? In this case, it does not matter what color you choose. And yes, we're going to leave all that the same as all advanced options. This is a basics class. So wherever it's intermediate or advanced, we're going to leave those off and you will learn the basics. And then if you want to learn more later, you'll be able to build on top of that. Okay. And so we're going to say create. And we have now created the artboard for our project. And I did misspell album. There's not two L's in album. Okay, so what I'm doing is sometimes you saw how it created tabs. You can pull those tabs apart. I started using Photoshop long before tabs. And so I just pull them apart because I like to be able to see two images at the same time like this. Another thing you can do is go to Window, Arrange, and you can tell it to float all in windows. And then it will take them out of that stacked folder tabbed mode and give you your images separately. I like to work this way. If you like working with tabs, if that works for you, then you should work that way. Okay, so I have my artboard created for my project. And you can see over here in my layer palette, and I can get under Windows, you can see I can get all my different palettes. If you close them all, and you want to work with them one at a time or two at a time, whatever's checked along here is what you'll see. And layers is the only thing I have on right now because like I said, I like to work minimally. If you want to turn on more, you can. If you want to work with the default, you can. It takes up a lot of space over here. But for the sake of this demonstration, we're just working with the layer palette. And you'll see once you create your first artboard, you set up the page, you're going to see that your first and only layer is your background. And it will automatically default name it that. And you can see a little picture of what is here in that image. If I come over here to the picture of my cat and her pumpkin, you'll see that that's showing me that that's the background because that's the only layer in the image. You have the ability to turn your layers on and off with the exception of the background. You see this, it's locked. If I add a new layer, come down here to this button, and I add a new layer, it's not locked, and I can turn it on and off. You can't do that with, you can with the background. Once you create another layer. So let me remove that one for now. To delete a layer, I just hit that trash can and say yes. Okay. And that is just the basics of getting this started and set up. Now, when I go to save, File, Save As for the first time. I'm going to put this somewhere that makes sense. I'm also going to fix that. Another L in there. Okay, and then I'm going to make sure I create a folder for this class. So new folder. I also got the wrong thing in there, didn't I? Okay, so I've created that folder. Let's fix that while I'm in here. Okay, and I want to save it as Photoshop. Okay, so make sure you're saving it at this point as Photoshop, because when you submit your assignments, you're going to submit them as Photoshop files. Okay, so we're going to save as Photoshop. Once you have a subscription, you can save it to the cloud if you want, but just make sure you're putting it in a folder so that you know where it is. Once I'm in this folder, I'm going to create yet another folder called Project 1. And I'm going to put everything, my project and its assets in here. Okay, so I'm going to save that. And now I'm ready to go. So I'm going to stop this video here and we will continue in the next one. But just for review, when you open Photoshop, you will have a series of pull-down menus across the top, and we'll go through that. You'll have a toolbar. You'll have a whole bunch of different palettes, but in this case, I've only got my layers turned on. And to create a new document, you're going to select New. And then you're going to walk through the different ones that you select. And you can see it's saved what we created last time here. So if I ever wanted to create that again, there it is. There are also some presets that you can use. Photo, print, and it will give you some letter, legal, tabloid, the ones that you're used to working with, right? Regular paper. And that will get your artboard. And one last thing, view, check rulers. We're gonna work with the rulers. It helps you see, scale, and get a sense of what you're working on. Now, we will leave it there and we will actually talk more, because you can see this is not in inches and I want to change this to inches. Preferences, whoops. General. Units and ruler. And we're going to work with inches. Okay. And so, you see that I have across the top 12 by 12 inches, and that gives me a sense of scale. So when I'm working with this, I know how I'm laying things out. Okay, so I'm going to stop this one here, and I'll see you in the next video.